Hey guys, tonight we drift beneath an ink-black canopy of stars as you settle in, the soft rustle of sheets like desert sand underfoot, candlelight flickers at the edge of your vision, and the faint hum of a ceiling fan whispers secrets in your ear. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, it's only figurative. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also drop a comment with your location and local time, so we can feel like we're all dozing off together around the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine you, nestled on a low divan, back against plush cushions dyed indigo by the Nile's silt, fingertips trailing along a wooden board etched in ochre. A warm breeze drifts through open windows carrying the scent of baked clay, riverine algae, and something you can't quite name. Perhaps lotus oil, or the Pharaohs' unguents. Across from you, a friend slides a carved ivory piece into place, its surface worn smooth by centuries of fingertips. Every move feels deliberate, like a ritual gesture more than a game. Historians still argue whether Senet originated in tombs as a funerary aid, or grew from simple domestic pastimes. But by around 300 BCE, boards had already appeared in predynastic Egypt as more than mere entertainment. You lift a stick die, a little bundle of knobbly sticks marked with dots, and toss it, the wooden rods clicking together like tiny bones. The result will dictate your fate: advance, retreat, or linger in limbo. The thrill pulses through you like sun-warmed limestone underfoot. In one playful moment, you lean forward and quip, "If I roll poorly, you owe me a cup of sour milk," drawing a stifled laugh from your opponent. Don't worry, they'll charge you less than an imperial levy for the loss. As the game unfolds, each carved square whispers stories. Some bear the eye of Horus, others depict the silent step of an anklet-clad dancer, a fringe tidbit. Certain boards were personalized by scribes who inscribed love poems beneath the surface. Hidden for eternity's quiet readings, you trace the lines, feeling the electric thrill of discovery, imagining eyes of ancient lovers peering up at you from the underworld. Your pieces inch forward, each move a metaphor. In Egypt's new kingdom, pharaohs played Senet hoping to secure favor in the afterlife. So says one mainstream fact you tuck away, but here in your softly lit room, it's simply you and that subtle clicking sound. Each sticks tumble a heartbeat. The board feels alive, as though the gods themselves could lean in, watching your fortunes shift. Listen, a distant bird cries, and you imagine it's the ibis-headed Thoth noting down your every clever or foolish decision. A gentle breeze stirs the sheer curtains, and you swear for a second you see flickers of torchlight on painted tomb walls. Maybe that's just the fan patterns playing tricks. Feel the tension in your fingertips as you cradle that ivory block. You might grin as you recall the last time you played, when your cousin rigged the sticks and claimed victory, only to be haunted by sand grains clinging to his robes all night. We'll revisit that joke later, so tuck it in your memory banks. As you ease back, the narration glides forward with no abrupt restarts. No, now in section 2, pause here, because the sands of time shift seamlessly, just like the pieces on this board. The rules you'll learn soon are less about squares and more about the dance between chance and will. Soon you'll glimpse how every move whispered eternity's promise, and how a simple pastime became a cosmic voyage. So, with the wax-soft candle guttering and the fan's lullaby circling, let your mind settle. You're about to discover why Senet was more than just a game. It was a mirror of your soul's journey. You drift back through a haze of incense smoke and shifting stars, feeling the board's grainy wood beneath your fingertips, as if it's a time machine powered by lotus-scented breezes. In this moment, you're no longer nestled on your divan, but squatting by the Nile's marshy banks in the late predynastic era, around 300–500 BCE. Your spindle-shaped sticks are simple pebbles worn smooth by river currents, and your mind flutters with excitement at the dawn of something extraordinary. Historians still argue whether Senet began as a ritual simulation of the soul's passage, or simply as a leisurely diversion during flood season rest. But either way, its roots are buried deep in those muddy waters. You scoop up a handful of clay tokens, tiny discs shaped by finger presses and sun-baked until they ring like soft bells. Few things feel more elemental than that tactile click when you drop one into place, sending a satisfying vibration up your arm. A mainstream fact to tuck into your memory. The oldest known Senet boards date to Naqada II, about 300 and 500 BCE, making them among the earliest Egyptian artifacts with abstract decoration. But here, beneath a sky so vast it humbles your modern anxieties, it's simply you, the game, and that promise of something beyond mere chance. Your opponent, perhaps a travelling scribe, wears linen so fine it shimmers like morning mist. She gestures to the grid of 30 squares carved into a plank of acacia, each marked with faint pecked dots or spirals. Some boards show only rudimentary lines, others boast elaborate animal motifs. You'd swear twitch when the breeze catches them just so. A quirky tidbit murmurs at the edge of your mind. A handful of boards discovered in tombs bear tiny hidden compartments under one of the squares, perhaps stashing love notes or aphrodisiac seeds. A sly reminder that even back then, romance snuck into every corner of life. You place a token on the first square, feeling its weathered edge, and the sun warms your back with prehistoric intensity. You glance at your sticks, hoping for a favorable toss. It's a simple binary system. Odd numbers mean move, even numbers mean stay. But the elegance lies in its unpredictability. A gentle breeze stirs papyrus reeds, and you imagine the gods themselves leaning closer, amused by your wrist flick. Your cousin's rigged sticks flash in your mind. Remember how he bent those shards of pottery so you'd lose? You chuckle softly into the dusk. Payback's another story, but tonight you're focused on origins. Nearby, a cluster of children gather to watch, their bare feet tucked under them, eyes wide as they whisper bets on your next roll. One kid, braver than the rest, offers you a clay vessel of sour milk if you win again. His father's a humble potter who sculpts grotesque faces on jugs for festival laughter. You wink at the boy, remind him that sour milk comes with a tangy aftertaste and dubious probiotic. 3 light jokes later, you've agreed on 2 tokens of milk for victory and 3 raucous chants if you lose. As the sun dips lower, the reeds glow golden, and you trace your piece's journey across the board. Square 5 bears the House of Happiness, Square 15 the Water, and 26 the ominous House of Thoth. Though the latter's meaning is debated, historians still argue whether those iconographic names signified cosmic waypoints or simply added charm to the play. Some even suggest each square corresponded to a month in the lunar calendar, a fringe theory that tickles your curiosity. Your moves feel alive, each token a tiny offering to some unseen force. The gap between squares feels like a breath, a measure of time slipping through mortal fingers. You lean forward, the reed mats whispering beneath you, and flick your stick die. It clatters, sending echoes through the hush of approaching night. You've landed on the water square again. Backward step, they'll accuse you, but your grin is serene. After all, it's not the destination but the journey. A distant owl hoots, and you imagine it as Athena's envoy, there to keep tabs on your cunning maneuvers. You tuck that image away for later telling. Last night I nearly outfoxed a goddess, you might say. And you would, if only the modern world allowed such tales without rolling eyes. But here the ancient world conspires to let your imagination wander unchallenged. The board's surface is marred with grooves, where countless opponents have rested their tokens, millennia of hope and despair etched in the wood. You're struck by how something so simple could cradle such depth. A game, yes, but one that mirrored life's ebb and flow. In one Fringe account, early players were said to whisper secrets into the board before each toss, sealing confessions beneath the tokens. It's unlikely but charming to imagine. A mainstream note to remember. By the time of the First Dynasty, around 310-100 BCE, Senet had morphed from rough-hewn pebbles to polished faience pieces, colour infused with copper and cobalt, an evolution that signals its rising importance. But tonight that evolution is your silent partner, holding space for your reverie. As the sky darkens further, fireflies begin their dance, mimicking the painted stars on late-period tomb ceilings. You press a token onto square 28, known ominously as the House of Water, and hold your breath. The wind winks through papyrus stalks, and for a heartbeat, everything stills. Then laughter, your own soft chuckle, and the children's giggles ripple through the dusk. You've advanced safely, free to aim for square 30, the House of Happiness, where victory seems almost within reach. Before you toss again, you lean back and close your eyes, letting that star-speckled sky anchor you. A scholarly debate stirs. Did Senet's popularity drive religious adoption, Or did religion elevate the game's status? Scholars still argue whether the board influenced tomb art, or vice versa. You smile, knowing that every time you slide a piece, you're reenacting that very debate. One subtle thumbs up for chance, one gentle nod to divine design. With the board before you, tokens clicking, children watching, and sky unfurling into velvet night, you sense that something simple has become transcendent. This game, grown from pebbles and reeds, is more than entertainment. It's a vessel for memory, myth, and perhaps a whisper of immortality. As stars alight overhead, you reach for another stick die. The reeds rustle as your drumbeat, the nights hush, your stage. And in that moment, you're both player and spectator, in a story older than any poem. Your fingers glide over the board's surface, and you feel every tiny groove, some worn nearly flat by millennia of play, others still crisp where artisans once chipped symbols into fresh wood. The scent of cedar drifts up, mingling with a faint tang of sun-baked clay from last night's pottery fires. This isn't just a slab with squares, it's a tapestry of meaning in polished wood, ivory or faience. You lift a corner and notice faint grain patterns dancing like desert dunes under a relentless sun. Most Senet boards were fashioned from native woods. Acacia, sycamore, even ebony, polished until your reflection might appear if the light hit just right. A mainstream fact whispers through time. During the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, craftsmen began inlaying ivory and ebony to distinguish royal sets, transforming playthings into luxury objects. But here, by the glow of your bedside lamp, it's simply a tactile marvel, and you can't help but trace those inlay seams as if reading a secret script. Each square bears iconography more nuanced than a modern app icon. Some feature dots, others spirals, and a few embossed hieroglyphs. Looks like little hieroglyphic emojis. You recall from Section 1 the Eye of Horus peeking from certain squares, promising protection. Here you discover the Waters square marked by 3 wavy lines, resembling the Wi-Fi symbol you curse when your streaming box falters. Historians still argue whether those lines originally represented the Nile's flood, or functioned as a warning of backward steps. Did ancient players glance at them and picture a watery grave or just a soggy sandal? You pick up a single token carved from ivory, smooth, warm to the touch, and oddly comforting against your palm. The ivory pieces evolved from rudimentary clay discs by the New Kingdom. Roughly 1550 BCE, reflecting Egypt's global reach when elephant tusks arrived from Nubia. A quirky tidbit lies beneath. Some boards contained secret compartments under squares rumored to store tiny scrolls of love poetry, or even aphrodisiac seeds just like you read last night, allowing clandestine messages to travel under the guise of a friendly match. Imagine sliding your token and oops, handing over Cupid's greatest hits. No two boards looked exactly the same. You might find a compact ivory panel no larger than a smartphone, though it lacked battery life intended for wealthy travelers, or a hefty limestone slab, more like a coffee table centerpiece. Some featured painted animals, jackals, lotus blossoms, or crocodiles. Touching those squares might have felt like daring a reptile to bite. In Fringe lore, a few boards incorporated tiny ridges that replicated sand dunes. Players claimed sliding tokens felt like racing across the desert floor. You tap a finger on one such raised ridge, it's faint, but enough to imagine your piece kicking up phantom grains of sand. Inlaid gold leaf appears in certain elite boards, catching candlelight like stars on a temple ceiling. You lean in, catching a glint that reminds you of your ceiling fan's gold accents. Modern luxury meets ancient ritual, a mainstream fact. By the Amarna period, around 1350 BCE, some royal tombs contain Senet boards inlaid with precious metals intended to travel with pharaohs into the afterlife. But scholars still argue whether those boards were ever actually played upon or served solely as funerary tokens. Were they meant for mortal pastime or divine entertainment? Your thumb brushes a hieroglyph etched in the corner, the House of Ankh, symbolizing life. You can almost hear the faint hum of that fan you turned on earlier, as if it's channeling the desert wind that once cooled grand palaces. You smile, remembering your cousin's rigged sticks. He'd always lean over and say, "May the House of Ankh bless my cheating arm," drawing laughter and eye rolls alike. Callbacks keep you grounded. Each familiar anecdote threads through your journey like papyrus vines. You explore the board's margins and spot tiny painted eyes called the eyes of the board, designed to ward off evil. A mainstream point, In some New Kingdom burials, priests inscribed protective prayers around these eyes, believing Senet could serve as a spiritual barrier. Yet historians still argue whether those prayers were intended for the living or the dead. Does the charm safeguard your game night snack or guide your soul through duet shadows? Colors here speak volumes. Faience tiles dyed deep blues or greens evoke the life-giving Nile and vegetation. Reds hint at the desert's sun-scorched cliffs. In one Fringe account, a particular royal board's green squares were ground from crushed beetles, a pigment so vivid that even today it defies reproduction. You blow gently on a green square and half expect tiny beetle legs to twitch. Variations extend beyond palette. Some craftsmen carved boards with raised borders, like miniature walls, claiming these kept malevolent spirits from wandering into the play area. You tap on that border and it rattles softly, like the click of your stick die from Section 2 echoing in the night air. Nowadays you might compare these bespoke boards to limited edition designer sneakers, each an artisanal statement, pricey and covetable. Yet back then, everyone from nobles to artisans customized their set. You imagine a tomb worker affixing a tiny scarab motif to his board, whispering a silent petition for rebirth. A quirky thought. Rumor has it, some players carried portable Senet sets disguised as wooden fans, a clever cover for gambling at festivals. Picture fanning yourself in scorching heat, then sliding a token under the guise of cooling off. You lean forward inhaling that cedar ivory clay musk, and realize each board is a multi-sensory invitation. The cold smoothness of stone, the warmth of polished wood, the faint roughness of painted clay, all converge in a tactile harmonica of sensations. You run a fingertip over that rough patch and it snaps you back. The journey of Senet isn't just movement across squares. It's a voyage through materials, symbols and personalities carved by craftsmen centuries ago. As the candle gutters softly and the fan hums on, you feel connected not only to opponents past and present, but to every hand that shaped and held this board. Each variation tells a story, a workshop's regional style, a player's status, or a family's secret code hidden beneath a hinged panel. And you're the latest custodian of these stories as you guide ivory and fans through that 70-dimensional grid. Okay, 30 squares, toward mystery and maybe a little cosmic favor. You lean in as the candle's glow softens, and suddenly you're no longer in your bedroom, but standing at the threshold of a temple courtyard, where columns carved with lotus blossoms soar skyward. Warm incense curls around your ankles, and the scent of myrrh hangs thick as honey. In one hand you cradle a Senet board polished with oil, in the other a handful of knotted sticks. Here, Senet is far more than parlor entertainment. It's a bridge to the divine. Imagine bearing your knees on smooth limestone, the earthen floor cool beneath your shins. Priests in immaculate white kilts move silently, their sandals whispering against stone. They arrange game pieces, ivory tokens, and ebony discs in precise formation, reciting hymns to Osiris, god of the afterlife. A mainstream fact hums through the hush. Senet boards were placed in temple offerings as early as the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, to secure divine favor and ensure cosmic order. But here your fingertips trace those painted hieroglyphs as if they're prayer beads, each square an invocation. You shift your gaze to the House of Riatum, the third square, where the sun god's falcon eye gleams in lapis lazuli inlay. As you slide your token there, you murmur a silent greeting to Ra, hoping he'll shine his light on your fortunes. In one Fringe whisper passed down by shadowy antiquarians, players once whispered their deepest regrets into that very square, believing the god would carry them away with his solar bark. Whether true or not, it tickles your imagination. Historians still argue whether those confessions were earnest pleas or later embellishments by storytellers chasing mystery. A priest approaches, holding an offering tray heaped with pomegranate seeds and freshly baked flatbreads. He places it beside the board, hinting at a feast to follow, because even gods appreciate snacks. You crack one seed between your teeth. Its tart burst reminds you of your cousin's sour milk wager. Remember that kid with clay vessels? 3 light jokes later, you quip to yourself that if the gods crave pomegranate, they must have a penchant for heart-healthy diets. The game shifts from playful pastime to sacred ritual. As the chanting rises, voices echo against vaulted ceilings adorned with painted scenes of the divine court, where Osiris presides over the winner's arrival in the field of reeds. Your token lands on Square 15, the Island of Fire, and you vibrate with a thrill. In ritual play, landing there meant drawing closer to purification by Sekhmet's fiery breath. A mainstream note: some temple boards bore scorch marks around that square, evidence real or staged of ritual bonfires. Yet historians still argue whether those burn marks occurred during ceremonies or were later accidents by careless temple helpers. You lock eyes with the high priest, his face half dark in torchlight. He raises an eyebrow, approval or admonishment. You can't tell, and you slide another token onto square 26, the House of Thoth. Here the ibis-headed god of wisdom is invoked to record your fate. In Fringe lore, players believed Thoth himself would tally their virtues and vices as they played, determining their place in the afterlife. It's unlikely that tangible divine accountants attended every match, but it's charming to picture a cosmic auditor making notes on papyrus scrolls hidden in Hermopolis's temple archives. A light breeze stirs the smoke, carrying distant drums that you swear thrum in time with your heartbeat. You close your eyes and imagine Osiris leaning over your shoulder, nodding when you make a clever move, just like that cousin of yours who celebrated like he'd won the kingdom. You picture him now, tossing his sticks with theatrical flourish, shamelessly rigged or not. Callbacks keep you anchored. Even amid divine ritual, human mischief persists. Above you, the temple ceiling is painted with constellations, each star a flickering promise of rebirth. The priests chant Ankh, Wedja, Seneb, the mantra for life, prosperity, health, a phrase you tuck away for later, a mainstream fact. Temple Senet boards often featured that mantra inscribed along the border, transforming the game into a miniaturized universe of blessings. But scholars still argue whether players recited those words consciously as part of the game, or if they were merely decorative flourishes added by artisans long after Senet's heyday. Your token shuffles forward to the final square, the House of Happiness, and a jolt of triumph surges through you, though you can't claim victory yet. The high priest raises the liturgy to a crescendo, and you bow your head to absorb the moment. In Fringe circles, some researchers claim Senet rituals included a water libation poured over the board, symbolizing the cleansing of the soul's path. You glance at the priests and note no water pitchers in sight, perhaps an embellished anecdote chasing the romantic idea of games as full-body spiritual experiences. The chanting subsides like a receding tide, and you're left with a hush broken only by your own breathing. A shaft of torchlight glints off the painted eye of Horus on the 12th square, reminding you of that witty remark you made back at home about Wi-Fi signals. Yes, you can still joke about ancient Egypt's tech problems, even if they only had flood warnings. A light joke bubbles up. Maybe the Nile needed a better rotor. You gather the sticks for one last toss. They click like enchanted bones, and you roll an odd number, move forward. Your piece glides onto the blessing square, a rarely used 15th position inscribed with a small ankh, and offering a shortcut closer to the afterlife's threshold. Mainstream evidence: a handful of Royal Senet sets from the New Kingdom include that bonus square, suggesting elite players enjoyed secret rule variations. Yet historians still argue whether bonus squares were widespread or limited to palace circles. Either way, you relish picturing pharaohs giggling behind closed doors as they unveiled secret rules to favored courtiers. Another joke flickers to life. Imagine Tutankhamun tucked under his death mask, whispering to his vizier, "Bet you didn't know about this sneak square, did you?" You grin, but you know the tomb's treasures have more secrets than gossip columns. At last, your piece crosses the board's final boundary, and a soft chime of temple bells rings in your mind. The high priest steps back, gesturing to the offering tray. You reach for a flatbread, its warmth like a gentle benediction. The incense smoke swirls above you, curling toward the painted heavens like prayers ascending on invisible currents. You rise, savoring the moment when game and ritual merge, leaving you breathless and strangely weightless. In this sanctified play, Senet is a conversation between mortal and divine, a whispered pact sealed with ivory and faith. You tuck the sticks into a linen pouch, worn by ritual and prank alike, and step back into your own time, back to the dimly lit room with the fan's low hum. Yet the temple's echoes linger. You can almost hear Osiris's approving murmur, feel Thoth's pen scratching judgment on unseen scrolls. And you? You carry that sacred thrill home, like a secret blessing tucked into your pocket, because whether Senet was ever more than a game or truly a cosmic conduit, you felt its power pulse beneath your fingertips. As the candle flickers its final dance and the fan whispers steady, let that divine hush settle in your mind. You're part of a lineage that spanned temples, tombs, and living rooms, where every move was a delicate prayer. You lean forward, fingertips grazing the worn contours of the 30-square grid, as the fan's hum fades beneath your racing heartbeat. In this moment, Senet isn't just a board, it's a stage for strategy, chance, and ritual all entwined. You lift the quartet of throw sticks, knobby little rods marked with dots, and feel their weight, each one a dice alternative whispering of ancient fortunes. Tossing them as a small ceremony, you cup them in your palm, close your eyes for a breath, and let them clatter onto the board, sending a shower of echoes that feels like distant drums. The outcome will shape your next move. 3 sticks face up, advance 3 spaces, 2 up, 2 steps forward, 1 up, 1 step, no sticks up, a dreaded 0, no move, and your turn passes. A mainstream fact floats by the New Kingdom era, around 1550 BCE, players sometimes used knuckle bones or carved dice instead, indicating the game's evolving relationship with chance and craftsmanship. But right now, it's simply you and those stick dice balancing hope on a blade edge of probability. You pause to consider your strategy. Do you rush toward the final house of happiness, or stall on protective squares to shield your tokens? There's subtle psychology here, baiting opponents into dangerous traps or daring them forward with a smug grin. Ancient Egyptian scribes even inscribed proverbs on gaming manuals. Cunning guides the stone, but fate holds the hand. Historians still argue whether these maxims accompanied every board or were the private notes of competitive priests. But you tuck that uncertainty into your mental treasure chest. Glancing at your opponent's ivory piece perched perilously on square 14, the dreaded House of Waters, you can't resist a light tease. Careful now, don't drown in embarrassment. They chuckle, but the ribbing is part of the ritual. A blend of playfulness and superstition. Fringe lore suggests players might anoint their pieces with perfumed oils or even sprinkle them with barley beer to curry divine favor mid-game. It's unlikely that every competitor carried tiny amphorae courtside, but it's charming to picture a priest-turned-gambler tipping a flask over his tokens. You slide your token forward 2 squares, landing on the 12th position, the House of Rebirth. Here, a carved ankh promises a second chance. In many rule reconstructions, landing there allows you to re-enter a captured token into play. A symbolic resurrection, a mainstream fact. Some tomb paintings depict victorious players rising from seated positions after landing on that square, hinting at a celebratory gesture akin to modern high fives. You lean back and stretch, imagining ancient competitors stamping their sandals in triumph. Your opponent tosses sticks with a flourish, the click-click resonating like a code. They misroll, the sticks showing 0 moves, and their turn evaporates. You stifle a triumphant giggle, recalling your cousin's bragging when he pulled that trick on you last family gathering. Callbacks abound. You can almost see him tiptoe away with a sour milk chalice in hand. But here, across this shadow-lit board, it's your moment. You push 3 steps forward and land on the ominous House of Thoth, square 26. In ritual play, this meant offering a silent negotiation with the god of wisdom, whispering a quick apology for any misdeeds and asking for leniency. Some players reportedly tapped the board thrice, invoking Thoth's mercy before proceeding. Historians still argue whether those taps were part of an official ceremony or simply superstitious ticks passed down verbally. You adopt the gesture anyway, tap, 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 like nudging a reclined ceiling fan to switch direction. A quirky tidbit surfaces. A handful of boards recovered at Amana include tiny holes drilled adjacent to square 26, speculated to hold incense cones. Players could burn frankincense mid-game, believing the fragrant smoke would carry their prayers. Whether these holes predated gameplay or were later artisans' experiments is murky, but it adds a sensory layer to your imagination. Smoke curling around your tokens as you negotiate divine bureaucracy. Strategy deepens, as only 2 tokens remain on the board. You contemplate sacrificing a token to block your rival's path, a maneuver documented in one fragmentary papyrus rulebook fragment. Mainstream evidence, a papyrus from the 13th century BCE, describes the noble art of blockade, where placing a token on the same square as an opponent forced them to retreat. Yet scholars still argue whether that rule was canonical or a localized variant used only at court. You decide to test the tactic. Slide your piece directly ahead, forcing their ivory disc backward into the waters, dramatizing their downfall. They raise an eyebrow and mutter a playful curse. May the desert scorpions dance on your sandals. You laugh, the ancient game's thrill mingling with light-hearted banter. A third joke nudges out. If scorpions aren't available, I'll settle for mosquito bites. The breeze stirs gauzy curtains. Your modern ritual of comfort, while you watch their token scuttle back 2 squares, like a critter seeking shade. Remember the protective squares studded with Eye of Horus motifs? Landing there grants immunity for 1 turn. You aim carefully, hoping to reach square 7 next toss. Watching the stick dice fly is like glimpsing future echoes of your own choices. You whisper encouragement. Come on 5, the sticks dance, and indeed show 3 moves. Close, but not perfect. You advance 3, landing on the House of 3 Truths, a debated square whose precise function remains elusive. Fringe theories claim it represented Thoth's triadic judgment, words, deeds, and thoughts. Whether those 3 measures ever governed play or were later allegorical overlays is lost to time, but you nod solemnly and move on, honoring the imagined ceremony. Your opponent has 1 piece left. Their eyes narrow as they flick the sticks. You sense the tension in their jaw. Competitive camaraderie from centuries past flows between you. They advance into your blockade, sacrificing the move to outwit you, then giggle mischievously. You groan. Forgotten family tricks die hard, yet you can't help but admire the cunning. Time seems to blur, sticks clatter, tokens slide, rituals unfold. You notice your breathing slow and your mind quiet, almost meditative, as if Senet's blend of strategy and ceremony lulls you deeper into relaxation. You're both an analyst mapping probabilities and a priestess performing a sacred rite. Roles intertwined by a simple wooden board, a mainstream fact, anchors you. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, described Senet as a noble pastime favored by pharaohs and priests, attesting to its elevated status. Yet historians still argue whether Diodorus witnessed live games or simply recorded hearsay from temple scribes. You tuck his account beside that papyrus fragment, weaving them into your private rulebook. 1 last toss remains, yours. You cup the sticks, lean in, heart fluttering. They fall, 1 up, 2 down, advance 1. You grit your teeth. It's a small step, but enough to reach the House of Happiness and win. You slide your token into the final square with deliberate slowness, savoring the moment. A triumphant chime echoes in your mind, like distant temple bells. You sit back, exhaling as the fan's hum returns, carrying you back from ancient ritual to your softly lit room. The board's surface feels cooler now, as if exhausted by centuries of play. You brush off imagined dust and smile, knowing you've danced the dance of strategy, chance, and ceremony in one seamless art. You sit back with the board balanced on your lap, candlelight flickering against painted walls that suddenly shift around you. You're no longer in your bedroom, but inside a silent, sandstone-lined tomb deep in Saqqara. The cool air tastes faintly of natron, and torch sconces cast long shadows over vibrant murals. Here, in the hush of eternity, Senet doesn't live on a table. It breathes from the painted walls and rests beside mummified hands. Lean in. You see a funerary scene where a noblewoman, draped in translucent linen, glides her slender fingers over a painted board. Her tokens, tiny depictions of ivory and ebony pieces, are frozen mid-slide, as though caught in a moment of divine play. A mainstream fact you tuck away. In Queen Nefertari's tomb, KV66, archaeologists discovered a real Senet board alongside wall paintings of a game in progress, dating to around 150 BCE, underscoring the game's importance in funerary rites. But here it's simply you and that image, suspended in time. Your fingertips ghost over the rough stone, tracing hieroglyphs that read, "Journey to the West," a poetic name for the afterlife's western horizon. You imagine the noblewoman whispering, "May this game guide me past the guardians," as her painted tokens inch forward. Historians still argue whether such tomb murals were intended as guides for the deceased, or as symbolic illustrations for visitors. Did the living view Senet as a comfort or as an instruction manual for the dead? You turn your head and spot a carved relief depicting Tutankhamun's golden Senet set, buried in his tomb, pieces nestled in a wooden box shaped like a chest. Those Faian tiles, once bright blue and green, are now dulled by centuries, but here you see them gleam as if fresh. A quirky tidbit whispers in your ear. One piece from Tutankhamun's set bears a tiny scarab motif that, when turned a certain way, reveals a hidden compartment, perhaps once holding a prayer or a tiny lock of hair. It's a playful secret in the king's eternal resting place. Your gaze wanders to the tomb of Khnumhotep II at Beni Hassan, where a mural shows two men seated on ornate chairs, their legs crossed, playing Senet before a table of offerings. You imagine the head of the household grinning as he slides a piece past a rival, quipping, "Mind your step or I'll claim your date wine," though no speech bubbles appear. You can hear the banter echo through the corridor, a mainstream note. These two murals date to around 1900 BCE, during the Middle Kingdom, cementing Senet's prestige across centuries. Yet scholars still argue whether tomb depictions reflect actual pastime scenes, or idealized images meant to glorify the deceased. Behind you, a niche in the wall holds real game pieces, glazed faience tokens and ivory pebbles, each stained by time. You pick up a faience piece, its surface still cool and slightly slick under your finger. It's etched with the eye of Horus on one side and a dot pattern on the other. Functional and protective, a fringe theory proposes that some tokens were consecrated with small bits of mummy wrappings, imbuing them with the power of the dead. It sounds spooky, but you smile at the image of an unsuspecting opponent rubbing his token before a throw. As you turn back to the paintings, you notice a scene from the tomb of Queen Myrnia at Thebes, where Senet is played on a board propped atop a tripod. The artist captured the grain of wood and the glint of metal hinges, so precisely that you can almost hear the metal clasp click. Casual observers might think it mere decoration, but a mainstream fact clarifies. Archaeologists found fragments of a tripod leg and hinge in the same burial chamber, confirming that artists reproduced real objects in their work. Yet, historians still argue whether these painted boards were part of daily life or manufactured solely for the afterlife stage. A torch sputters, and the mural's colours dance. You glimpse a tiny dancer painted alongside the game, her arms raised in celebration. Victorian explorers once misinterpreted such scenes as banquet revels, but modern analysis shows she holds a sistrum, a musical rattle used in ritual performances tied to Senet ceremonies. You chuckle, remembering your own modern music. If they only had Spotify, they'd have made playlists for Senet nights. 3 light jokes later, you're back at the edge of that stone bench, balancing reality and reverie. Your eye catches a niche where a wooden Senet board, its paint flaked, rests inverted against a sarcophagus. The board's underside bears crude graffiti, names of travelers or tomb robbers. It's unclear. A quirky tidbit. During the excavation of this tomb in 1910, workers inscribed their own names on the boards, viewing them as souvenirs. Those scribbles remain alongside centuries-old hieroglyphs, blending histories in layers of time. Historians still argue whether these graffiti are valuable records of early archaeological practice, or vandalism that detracts from the tomb's sanctity. You crouch lower, spotting a tiny ceramic stick-die piece tucked in a corner, cracked but intact. Its 4-rod design matches the everyday sticks you've tossed at home, a mainstream observation. Such clay dice predate later wooden alternatives, indicating Senet's widespread reach beyond royal circles. Yet scholars still argue whether these humble clay pieces belong to children learning the game, or adults playing casual rounds. You imagine a young apprentice rolling those sticks, fingers stained with clay, eyes gleaming with the thrill of chance. The mural's final panel shows the deceased kneeling before Osiris, board in hand, as if handing it off like a sacred text. You lean in, heart thumping. Is this the game's ultimate purpose, guiding souls to divine judgment? A fringe interpretation suggests that Senet served as a cosmic map, each square representing astronomical constellations. Whether perpetrators of those theories had access to star charts or merely romanticized the game is unclear, but it's a delicious puzzle piece in the mosaic of Senet lore. As your vision blurs with torchlight and shadows, you place the faience token back into its niche and settle onto a low bench. The weight of centuries presses gently, like a reminder that games outlive generations. You stroke the wall's cool stone, feeling the etched lines beneath your palm, and carrying with you the silent stories kiln-fired and painted into eternity. The tomb's hush deepens, broken only by your own breathing. You are a spectator and a participant, moving across painted boards, handling real artifacts, and witnessing how art and object entwine to seal Senet's fate in the underworld. The artisans of old meant these images to last forever, just as this story now lives in your memory. A final light breeze stirs the candles, and you blink, finding yourself back in your dim room. The ceiling fans hum, a soft welcome. The murals vanish, but their echoes remain imprinted on your mind. You've traced painted plays and held relics, and in doing so you've become part of the grand tapestry that cemented Senet's place in eternity. You settle into the familiar hush as your fingertips rest on the board's edge, and you sense the ancestral tension humming beneath the wood grain. Tonight, Senet isn't simply a dance of tokens. It's a tightrope walk between chance and your own cunning touch. You cup the stick dice in your hand, feeling each knobby rod's weight, and you know that every toss is a silent wager. Will luck carry you forward, or will strategy bend fate to your will? You begin with a practiced flick, the sticks scattering across the board like tiny logs tumbling down a hillside. They click in an unpredictable rhythm, 1 up, 3 down, and you slide your token forward 1 square into the House of Thoth. Here wisdom whispers that skill matters, but luck still reigns supreme. A mainstream fact hums softly in your mind. Senet's rules likely evolved to balance both elements, with certain rule reconstructions suggesting that blocks and captures rewarded strategy while stick throws upheld chance's sovereignty. Historians still argue whether the original game prioritized cunning tactics or embraced pure randomness as a reflection of life's whims. You lean in, brushing a strand of hair from your cheek, and recall how in Section 5 you tapped the board thrice to invoke Thoth's mercy. Tonight, you wonder if that ritual ever truly swayed your fortune, or if it was merely a confidence boost. You chuckle, picturing your cousin mumbling under his breath as he rigged those sticks long ago, convinced that his cheating arm would win him bragging rights and a cup of sour milk every time. Your opponent, a seasoned friend with a sly grin, nudges a decorative fine ace token into place and offers what passes for sincere advice. Don't rush the currents, ride them. You nod, eyes narrowing as you consider the board's layout. Do you risk a direct path to the Island of Fire, or stall on protective squares to bait your rival into dangerous waters? Strategy glitters like the gold filigree you admired in Section 8, but you can't ignore the flutter in your gut that perhaps fate itself holds the reins. You decide on a hybrid approach. Finesse tempered by patience. You whisper, "Let's see what luck offers." Another toss sends sticks clattering. 2 up, 2 down, and you advance 2 squares, settling on the House of Rebirth. In many reconstructions, landing here grants a bonus roll or resurrects a captured token, rewarding calculated timing. You tap the board once for luck, once for strategy, and once for flair, an homage to your triple tap ritual, of course. A quirky tidbit drifts through your memory. Some boards included miniature hourglass timers, forcing players to decide swiftly whether to capitalize on a good roll or wait, introducing a fresh layer of pressure. Whether those timers were ever common or simply an eccentric artisan's experiment remains debated. But you imagine the hiss of sand as each decision clock ticks down. You smile, knowing you'd always stall for an extra heartbeat, camera running or not. Your friend leans forward, rolling thick knucklebones instead of sticks. They scatter in a shower of ivory dots, landing in that coveted pattern. 3 moves. Their token flies toward the scales of balance, earning them temporary immunity from capture. You bite back a light joke about them needing a bigger board for all their safety nets, remembering the tavern crowd's wagers in Section 9 and the baker's expectant grin. You briefly sense the fans hum behind you, the same one that lulled you through divine rituals in Section 4 and the hush of burial chambers in Section 6. That modern comfort anchors you as ancient echoes swirl. Osiris's weighing scales, Thoth's ledger, the Pharaohs' courtly winks. Chance and skill have danced together since Senet's inception like desert winds and shifting sands, one unpredictable, the other shaped by June. Glancing down, you spy your next target, Square 14, the infamous House of Waters. Step there unprepared, and you retreat. Step there with cunning and you bait opponents into error. You recall the fringe law that cursed dice, once cursed players landing too often in that watery trap. Boards allegedly bore tiny carvings warning tread carefully, mortal. Whether those warnings ever carried true magical weight, or were simply poetic flourishes lost to time, is a question scholars still argue over, but you brace, daring fate to challenge you. The sticks spin and fall, No moves. 0. Your heart flinches. Opportunity lost. You glance at your friend's triumphant smirk and can't help but laugh. A soft release that echoes your earlier giggles when cousin-rigged sticks foiled you. A third light joke escapes. I swear my pieces just take coffee breaks at the worst moments. Their turn moves swiftly. 4 steps straight into the island of fire, igniting a small ritual of perfumed oil in your mind from Section 8. You imagine a drop of rosewater sizzling into flame. But here, in your softly lit room, it's just the drone of the fan and the faint smell of your lavender pillow spray drifting in. You lean back, savoring the interplay. They outmaneuver you with chance, but tomorrow you'll return armed with new tactics. As dusk deepens outside your window, you roll again, 2 moves, and slide your token onto square 26, the House of Thoth. You offer a solemn nod to the god of insight, wondering if invoking him sways dice or simply steadies your own nerves. Strategy whispers to press forward. Luck murmurs to hold. You opt for forward, edging toward the House of Happiness. A mainstream fact grounds you. Some papyrus fragments from Der el-Medina outline advanced tactics, blocking, sacrificial retreats, and alliance plays, hinting that real players approached Senet with the rigor of generals planning a siege. Yet historians still argue whether these papyri represent everyday players' notes or scribes' theoretical musings on the game's symbolism. You tuck that debate beneath your next move, eager to test it. Your sticks land, 3 up, 1 down, and you push 3 spaces ahead, placing your token onto the House of 3 Truths. Legend says here you must confess a flaw or boast a virtue before proceeding. An echo of the confession rituals in Section 7. You catch your reflection in a polished square and whisper, I confess I still can't master blocking your next move, drawing a rueful smile from your friend, and a quiet sigh of relief for that small, playful honesty. Their final turn clatters forward, edging them to the brink of victory. You sense the stakes. A single roll will decide if chance crowns them champion, or if skill will have its final say. You cup the sticks, heart fluttering, and throw. They land, 1 up. You exhale 1 space forward. You slide your token to the gateway of horizons, tantalizingly close. Your friend grins as they prepare their roll. But there's time. Your turn again. You gather every lesson from temple rituals to tavern wagers, from tomb shadows to royal courts, and whisper, let's tip the scales. The sticks spin and settle. 4 moves. You leap forward 4 squares, vaulting past their token and landing squarely in the House of Happiness. A surge of triumph warms you, as real as any brewer's honey bread or Pharaohs' date wine. You lean back, heart still galloping, and listen as the fan hums like distant applause. You've danced the delicate tango of chance and skill, and for now, skill has left. A mainstream note, later Greek accounts lauded Senet as a game of wise men, praising skillful play, yet paintings show emperors relying on luck's favor. Historians still argue whether skillful tactics or divine randomness dominated formal play. Tonight, you've felt both. Fingers tingling, you gather your tokens and sticks. The board's wood feels warm under your palm, a silent witness to countless wagers, rituals, and debates. You smile, knowing that every throw was a conversation with fate, every strategy a test of your own ingenuity. As you pack away the board, the hush of your room settles in. You'll replay these moves in your mind as you drift towards sleep, comforted by the knowledge that sometimes skill wins, and sometimes you just have to trust the roll. You lean forward, fingertips brushing the smooth edge of the board as candlelight flickers across painted walls. Only now you're seated atop a raised dais in a grand palace hall, ivory pillars towering around you. Ropes of perfumed garlands hang from the ceiling, and guards in gleaming bronze stand at attention. Across from you, the young pharaoh reclines on a gilded chair, sandals kicked off, bare feet brushing the polished floor. You're his chosen opponent for this exclusive evening of Senet, an honor you didn't even know you'd be bestowed. But hey, surprises happen when you're invited to the royal court. The pharaoh's lips curl into an amused smile as his advisor arranges the ivory and ebony tokens on the board. Ready? He teases, voice mellifluous as the Nile's current. You nod, heart thumping like distant war drums. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. Tomb inscriptions and reliefs from the Middle Kingdom, around 1850 BCE, depict pharaohs playing Senet in public ceremonies, demonstrating both piety and power before their subjects. But here, under a canopy of painted stars on the ceiling, it's simply you and the boy king circling the same 30 squares. You cup the stick dice in your hand and whisper a silent prayer to Thoth, hoping his wisdom favors you. You toss, and they click across the board, 2 sticks up, 2 down. You draw back, sliding your token forward 2 spaces, landing on the House of Rebirth. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some pharaohs supposedly commissioned personalized Senet boards engraved with their cartouche and miniature throne motifs, secreting tiny scrolls beneath the House of Ankh Square to conceal their personal prayers to the gods. Whether those hidden scrolls ever survived the tomb's humidity or were trampled by tomb robbers is a mystery still whispered in archaeologists' corridors. Your opponent, the pharaoh, laughs softly, a sound like tinkling lotus bells. He leans forward, offering you a goblet of date wine. "A sip for luck," he says, and you accept, the sweet elixir rolling over your tongue like warm honey. You can't help but think of Section 4's temple feasts and how priests offered pomegranate seeds to Osiris. Now you're tasting royal hospitality in liquid form. One light joke flutters in your mind. If only my housemates shared wine so generously when I beat them at modern board games. He flicks his wrist, sending his stick dice tumbling. Free moves. His ivory piece glides past yours, landing on square 14, the House of Waters. You raise an eyebrow. Bold move. In standard play, that square spells backward steps for many. Yet in the Pharaoh's circle, landing on risky squares is a display of confidence and divine favor. Historians still argue whether these high-stakes gambits were casual bravado or structured tests of royal nerve, but in this moment, you sense both audacity and ceremony in his gesture. You trace the inlaid gold filigree along the board's edge, real gold, mind you, worn smooth by countless fingers. A quirky tidbit pricks your fancy. One royal set discovered in Amenhotep III's villa featured minute gold flecks ground into the faience glaze, creating a subtle shimmer that sparkled only by torchlight, an effect some speculated symbolized the Milky Way draped across the night sky. You tilt your head, imagining yourself sliding your piece beneath the cosmic glow. Your turn comes, and you flick the sticks. They clatter, 1 up, 3 down. You advance 1 space into the island of fire, and a thrill surges through you. In court circles, landing on that square demanded a small ritual, pouring a drop of perfumed oil from a silver vial onto the board. As an offering to Sekhmet, goddess of transformation, you pull a tiny vial from your belt. Yes, you came prepared, and tip a single drop onto the flame hieroglyph. It beads like liquid gold and evaporates in a hint of sandalwood. The third light joke slips out. "If only my modern cologne smelled half this regal." The pharaoh smiles, impressed. He lifts his hand, signaling a slave to bring fresh lotus petals and incense. The fragrance curls around you like a warm embrace, and for a heartbeat, you feel unworthy of such luxury. Yet here you are, trading strokes with a ruler who once commanded armies. You swallow your awe, remembering that ancient advisors cautioned young kings to play Senet as a lesson in patience and fate. A mainstream note. Reliefs from Hatshepsut's mortuary temple show her playing Senet alongside court officials, symbolizing wise governance through balanced gameplay. Scholars still argue whether these scenes depict actual matches or idealized portrayals of pharaonic virtues. Determined not to be overshadowed, you toss the sticks again. They land 0 moves. Ouch. You suppress a groan as your turn passes. The pharaoh arches a brow, a teasing flicker in his eye. "Even the gods deny us on occasion," he murmurs, sliding his token 6 spaces forward. "Yes, you heard that right. 6. You blink, but the rule variation is real. Elite sets sometimes included a bonus X rule, where certain stick combinations granted extra moves, reserved only for royalty. Historians still argue whether this X rule was widespread among courtiers or a fleeting fad, but you're experiencing it firsthand. You watch your pharaoh move effortlessly, tokens clinking like miniature bells. His advisor records each move on a papyrus scroll, the copper tip of his stylus glinting in candlelight. You wonder if he's noting a play-by-play or scribbling down strategies for the next festival. A quirky thought. Rumor has it that some advisors once bribed players to lose intentionally, currying favor with favored opponents. You chuckle. Politics and games go hand in hand, whether in your office or a royal court. Your turn again, and you send the sticks skittering. 2 moves. You edge into the scales of balance, the square that grants temporary protection. You lean forward, tapping the board thrice in the ceremonial tap of truth. Yes, you remember it from section 5, hoping to seal your safeguard. The flicker of torchlight catches the ivory glow and you smile at the callback patterns repeat. Whether you're in a dusty tomb or a glittering throne room, a pharaoh studies you. Expression inscrutable. Then he leans in, voice conspiratorial. Beat me, and tomorrow the court jester performs your praises at dawn. You can't help but grin. Public humiliation from a jester is better than dinner alone. 3 light jokes later, you're eyeing your next move as though your future comedic reputation depends on it. On his next turn, he lands squarely on the House of Happiness, finishing the game with grace. He raises the stick dice toward the heavens, and bows. Your turn again? He offers, but you decline with a polite shake of the head, heart racing. You've learned something beyond any rulebook tonight. Senet was a political theatre, a way for rulers to display grace under pressure and humility before fate. He stands and approaches, placing a hand on your shoulder. Few outsiders last a single match, he says softly. You have my respect. A mainstream fact swirls in your mind. Some pharaohs used Senet outcomes to inform political decisions. Victory might signal a good harvest year, defeat a warning of drought or unrest. Historians still argue whether such divinations were genuine or post hoc rationalizations by scribes. But tonight, you feel the weight of that belief settle around you like a cloak. As you gather the pieces, the guards lower their heads, and the advisor rolls up his papyrus. The incense wavers, and you blink suddenly back on your divan, the board before you in your softly lit room. The pharaoh's laughter fades, replaced by the gentle hum of your fan. You cradle an ivory token, feeling its warmth, and smile at the memory of regal competition. This evening you played, not just for victory but for favor, status, and shrine. You glimpsed how a simple game could serve as a political tool, a measure of character as potent as any council decree. And you? You walked away with the king's respect, and at least one good story for tomorrow's coffee break. You settle back into your cushions, the board resting on your lap as the fan hum burbles like distant chatter at a festival. Now imagine you're not alone, but surrounded by a motley crowd gathered in a bustling tavern courtyard. Just beyond the shadow of the city walls, lanterns sway overhead, casting dappled pools of warm light across woven mats and low tables. The air is thick with the scent of roasting fowl, spiced wine, and laughter. In this lively scene, Senet is no longer a lone pastime, but a social thread weaving disparate lives together. Across from you, merchants in dyed linen haggle over copper amphorae of date wine. Nearby, a scribe adjusts his coal-lined eyes and jots shorthand on a scrap of papyrus between throws. A mainstream fact hums in your ear. During the New Kingdom, around 1400 BCE, Senet boards have been discovered in commoners' homes and taverns in Deir al-Medina, showing the game's reach beyond palaces into everyday social life. Yet here, amid clinking cups and convivial banter, it feels less like archaeological trivia and more like the pulse of community. You slide your token across the board, feeling the coarse weave of the mat under your forearms. The group of potters crowd around, each eager to test their luck and boast over a few sticks. One potter, his hands still flecked with wet clay, shouts, "Beat me, and I'll shape you a new jar. No handles, just for fun." You laugh and quip back, only if it holds wine better than your last. 3 light jokes later, you've agreed to wager a pair of simple but sturdy jugs that will bear your name in swirling hieroglyphs. A quirky prize that will immortalize your victory in their workshop. A slender dancer twirls nearby, her anklets jangling like distant stars. She pauses to catch her breath and leans close, murmuring a fringe tidbit. Some social clubs in Memphis played Senet blindfolded on moonlit nights, believing that removing sight heightened spiritual connection. You raise an eyebrow. Blindfolded board games might leave you tripping over your cushions at home, but you can't deny the romantic allure. Historians still argue whether those moonlight sessions were genuine practices or poetic exaggerations by romance-seeking scribes, but the idea tickles your imagination. A cup of spiced wine is placed before you, its steam carrying hints of cinnamon and honey. You inhale deeply and roll your sticks. They click. 2 moves. You slide your piece to the House of Thoth and tap the board thrice, invoking wisdom for your next choice. Nearby, a father and son play side by side, The boy's ivory discs gleam like starlight, and the father gives gentle guidance, reminding you of family matches back home. A mainstream fact glitters in your memory. Senet boards and pieces have been found in children's tombs alongside toys, suggesting the game taught youth about life's ebbs and flows. Yet scholars still argue whether those juvenile sets were meant for instruction or simply for entertainment. As your token edges toward the Island of Fire, the potters lean in, wagering bets in hushed tones. One wagers his apprentice's labor for a week, another his favorite kiln spot at next month's festival. You grin and counter, "I'll bet you 5 loaves of honey bread if I win." 3 light jokes later, a baker sidles up, offering 2 fresh loaves in exchange for a single token should you triumph. You accept with a mock bow and tuck the deal into your mind. Tonight's spoils might be sweet indeed. All around, music drifts from an open doorway, lutes, sistrums and frame drums weaving a lively rhythm. You catch yourself tapping your foot in sync, glancing at the board through a haze of melody. A curious onlooker offers a fringe rumor. Certain social clubs used Senet as a divination tool. Players interpreted stick throws as omens for harvests or marriages. It sounds like your high school fortune mason reading tea leaves, but you nod, because historians still argue whether such divinations were common practice or mere afterthoughts by those craving mystique. You lean forward, sipping your wine, and roll again. 3 moves. Your piece snaps onto the House of Rebirth, granting you a bonus turn. You can almost hear the table gasp. The baker clutches his loaves, his eyes glittering with anticipation. You grin and tap your stick on the board, tap, 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 calling on ancient ceremony amid tavern revelry. A mainstream fact surfaces. Occasional rule variants allowed bonus rolls for landing on specific squares, though the exact rules varied by region and era. Scholars still argue whether such variations were officially sanctioned or spontaneous house rules whipped up by competitive players. Your bonus roll gives you 4 moves, enough to dash your token into the House of Happiness. You slide it triumphantly into place. The courtyard erupts, cheers, applause, and the clang of cups on tables. A light joke cracks your lips. "I accept your 5 loaves of honey bread, but the potter's jugs will have to wait." Laughter ripples through the crowd. A wandering poet steps forward, offering to immortalize your victory in verse for a craftsman's fee. You smile and decline, preferring your tale told over shared wine and laughter. Yet you tuck away the offer. That's a unique souvenir. A fringe thought lingers. Some tavern-goers recorded match outcomes on wooden tablets to settle future disputes. You imagine waiting later to find your score carved into a tablet, like a leaderboard etched in barley. Historians still argue whether these tallies were widespread or rare relics, but it's charming to picture. As the evening winds down, the potters pack away their tools, the baker wraps your honey bread in palm leaves, and the scribe tucks his papyrus into a case. A mainstream note reassures. Excavations at Tel El Amarna uncovered dozens of Senet sets alongside everyday pottery shards and market wares, confirming the game's ubiquity in social spaces. Yet scholars still argue whether Senet nights were formal gatherings or casual impromptu matches. Here, in the warm glow of lanterns, you know the answer. Both. You pack up your board, the clink of ivory and ebony tokens in your bag echoing like soft applause. You breathe in the mingled scents of wine, bread, and incense, feeling as full in spirit as you are near your stomach. A final light joke drifts through your mind. "If I ever open a tavern, Senet nights will be mandatory attire. Think of the merchandise sales alone." You chuckle, imagining branded boards with neon hieroglyphs. With the board under your arm, and a loaf of honey bread tucked against your side, you step out into the night air. Lanterns fade behind you, but the laughter lingers like a gentle melody. You realize that Senet's true magic wasn't just in its squares or stones, but in the shared moments, wagers, and camaraderie illuminated by lantern light. You lean forward as your token hovers on the edge of the board, and suddenly the painted squares beneath your fingertips dissolve into a shifting landscape of swirling sands and shadowy gateways. This isn't mere victory lap, it's the Afterlife Passage, a liminal corridor between your mortal stand on the Nile's banks and the vast expanse of the Duer. The board's final squares stretch into an endless plain, and you sense the weight of eternity pressing against your brow, like the cool touch of that faience piece you handled in Section 6. Every move now feels freighted with meaning. You flick your stick dice, and they tumble across the board with a hollow click, landing in a pattern that grants you a single advance. Your token slides into the House of Reatum, the ratchet of transformation, and you feel an electric shiver run down your spine. A mainstream fact hums through the haze. Egyptians inscribed Senet boards in tombs not only as entertainment, but as symbolic guides for navigating the afterlife's trials. Boards have been found alongside funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, dating to around 50. Historians still argue whether the game served as a literal map for the deceased, or as a teaching tool for the living preparing for judgment. You're surrounded by high walls of warped gold and obsidian, their surfaces etched with scenes of judgment and rebirth. Above you, a faceless Anubis looms, holding scales that weigh your heart against a feather plucked from Maat's wings. That feather flickers in candle glow, and you imagine it brushing your cheek. Do you feel calm or dread? You whisper to yourself, "Don't embarrass me now," recalling your cousin's rigged sticks backstage at your last family gathering. Even gods appreciate a clever joke. Your next toss brings 3 moves, and your token glides into the field of offerings, a square awash in painted bowls of dates, wine, and lotus blossoms. You inhale deeply, tasting the imagined sweetness of honeyed wine trickling down your throat. Fringe lore suggests players once actually placed small amounts of incense or food on replica offerings built into deluxe boards, hoping to satiate the spirits as they played. It's unlikely your modern ceiling fan could waft frankincense smoke convincingly, but you breathe in anyway, letting that smoky perfume swirl around you. A soft drumbeat echoes from beyond, like distant sandals on limestone, guiding your token toward the Hall of Two Truths. Here, every misstep or clever maneuver counts double. Landing there requires you to confess a hidden fault before proceeding. You shudder. What secret would you admit? Maybe that time you hid your siblings' homework as revenge. You shush the thought, imagining scribes behind you jotting down your confession on honey-smooth papyrus. Historians still argue whether these confession rituals accompanied real gameplay or were later allegorical additions by pious scribes. You tap the board 3 times with your fingernail, mimicking the ceremonial tap of truth. The surface vibrates under your nail, and you feel oddly cleansed, as though each tap scrapes away these modern anxieties about work deadlines or whether you watered your plants today. A third light joke drifts to the surface. If only HR required us to play Senet before annual reviews, we'd all come clean about skipped deadlines. Your token inches forward to square 28, the dreaded waters of oblivion. Here, souls risk being swept into a river of forgetfulness, losing their names and memories forever. You swallow, picturing yourself adrift on a silent current, face upturned to a cobalt sky. But in the game, landing here forces a retreat of 2 squares, and you let out a relieved chuckle when you slide back to the safer Scales of Balance square. A quirky tidbit: some boards featured a tiny rim of cyan along that square's edge, to catch stray tokens, perhaps to emphasize the concept of being held in place rather than drowned. Before you toss again, you inhale the faint scent of lotus oil drifting through this shadowy palace. It reminds you of Section 4's temple rituals, where priests anointed boards and players alike. You murmur, "I could use a dab of that under-eye serum," as your own fan's breeze brings a hint of your lavender pillow spray. Callbacks stitch together these textures: sand, incense, candle wax, and now floral perfume. Your next roll is a slim one. Only 1 move, so you advance to square 29, Gateway of Horizons. A narrow arch painted with wings of Horus. Beneath its curve, you imagine stepping into endless possibility. Fringe theories claim this gateway symbolized the zodiac's rising signs, mapping cosmic destinies onto the board. Whether scribes actually consulted star charts mid-game, or simply got carried away in poetic imagery, remains up for grabs. Historians still argue whether Senet's later symbolism grew from astronomical observation, or from funerary texts projecting spiritual maps. You pause, aware of your breath rising and falling like tide against the shore. Your heart hammers soft staccato as you prepare for the final toss, the one that decides if you transcend or remain tethered to the mortal plane. Fingers trembling slightly, you scoop up the sticks, pressing them against your palm as if they were the grainy seeds of fate. Then release them onto the board. They click and clatter, each tick echoing like a dropped coin in a temple of Amun. They show 2 moves. You exhale, moving your token into the House of Rebirth, a bonus square that grants 1 final roll. You grin, picturing your cousin's triumphant laugh when he snagged that extra play at the last moment. It's a timeless trick. The board vibrates under your fingertip as if in approval. 1 more toss. You whisper encouragement. Make it count. The sticks spin and settle. 3 moves. You rock forward, pushing your token through the painted arch of the final square, the House of Happiness. A sudden warmth blooms in your chest, as if you've just parted the veil between worlds. The air shimmers and you feel a gentle hand on your shoulder. In that instant, you're back on your divan, board on your lap, fan hum lulling you home. The afterlife's gateway collapses into painted wood. You breathe deeply, heart still echoing with drumming steps and whispering sands. A mainstream fact anchors you. Tomb inscriptions often accompanied Senet boards with spells to animate the game for the deceased. A remarkable fusion of play and magic. Historians still argue whether those spells were ever activated by living players or were purely symbolic blessings left at interment. You stretch, relief and quiet triumph mingling in your veins. The taste of lotus oil and incense lingers, and you half expect to see an Anubis statuette nod in your direction, though it's probably just the flicker of your bedside lamp. You'll tease your gaming buddy tomorrow. Who knew I'd need divine counsel to beat you at a board game? They'll laugh, unaware of the cosmic negotiation you just conducted. As you wipe imagined dust from the board, you feel peaceful, thankful for this journey that began with simple pebbles and ended at Heaven's Gate. Senet wasn't just a pastime, it was a staged pilgrimage, a rehearsal for the soul's ultimate journey. And tonight, you played You lean in, fingertips tracing the familiar grid, and feel the board's pulse shifting beneath your hands. Senet isn't static, but a living tapestry, its rules and symbols morphing as dynasties rose and fell. Tonight, you drift through time, watching the game evolve from the rough-hewn gravel of the Old Kingdom to the finessed royal variants of the New Kingdom and beyond. Picture yourself in a dusty workshop of the Third Dynasty. Around 2600 BCE, craftsmen hew a flat slab of wood from local sycamore, carving 30 shallow squares with stone chisels. Your token is a simple clay disc, sun-dried until it rings with a hollow plink when dropped. A mainstream fact hums softly. During the Old Kingdom, Senet boards were often unadorned, featuring only pecked lines or rudimentary dots, reflecting a game still finding its form. But here, in this smog of wood dust and the acrid tang of freshly split sap, it's simply you, experimenting with rules scribbled on papyrus scraps. Move forward on odd sticks, stall on eve. Fast forward to the Middle Kingdom, roughly 2000 BCE, and you're seated in a noble's villa. The board before you gleams with inlaid ivory dots and ebony borders. Craftsmen have standardized square names, House of Waters, House of Rebirth, and carved them into the wood. Historians still argue whether these names originated as religious invocations or as mnemonic aids for players to learn the game, but you tuck that debate into a corner of your mind. Tonight, you glide a Fiend's token into the House of Rebirth, feeling that same thrill you tasted in Section 5. One light joke flickers to life. If only your modern office had mnemonic squares, you'd never forget your TPS report deadlines. By the Second Intermediate Period, around 1650 BCE, foreign influences seep in. You're now in Avarice, Hyksos merchants trading pottery and stories of Western lands. Boards adopt new shapes, some slanted edges, others rounded corners, and tokens appear in glass paste borrowed from Canaanite artisans. A quirky tidbit whispers, a few boards used carved scarabs instead of simple pieces, each scarab rumored to grant the player a specific magical boon, love, success, or an excellent harvest. Whether those boons ever manifested beyond a sprightly mood boost is murky, but you can't resist imagining your tokens scuttling across the board like a tiny armored champion. The New Kingdom, circa 1550-1470 BCE, ushers in an era of lavish luxury. You find yourself in the workshop of Amenhotep III, wielding turquoise faience and painting gold leaf filigree. The X rule emerges. Certain stick combinations grant bonus moves, a variation reserved for pharaohs and high priests. In Section 8, you experience that very bonus when the pharaoh's sticks yielded 6 moves. A callback warms your chest. Power and privilege bend the game just as they bent society. You crack a third light joke. If only your local bar had high roller rules, you'd never lose at trivia night. By the Amarna period, a religious revolution shakes traditions, and Senet shifts too. Boards carved with Aten's rays replace old gods' hieroglyphs. The House of Reatum Square morphs into the House of Aten's blessing. Historians still argue whether these Amarna boards were functional or purely political statements meant to broadcast monotheism. You swipe your token across a sun disk square, feeling the board's sanded grooves in the flickering torchlight. It's not just a game anymore, but propaganda etched in polished wood. You lean back, breathing the acrid incense scent from Section 4, and whisper, "Talk about aligning your rules with your worldview." Later, during the Ramside era, traditions rebound. Boards return to classic motifs, but new embellishments appear. Hinged compartments under the board hold secret rule scrolls, and some sets incorporate tiny bells that tinkle when pieces move. A fringe theory suggests these bells were used to ward off restless spirits during afterlife ceremonies, though it's equally likely they were just showy accessories. You press a token into a hinged square, and imagine bells jingling like distant chimes, a playful echo of your fan's buzz back in your room. As time marches into the Third Intermediate Period, 170-64 BCE, political fragmentation scatters customs. In Thebes, players favor quick play variants, boards trimmed to 24 squares, tokens start closer to the finish. Meanwhile, in Tanis, grand boards the size of trays appear in temple complexes, meant for public festival matches. Historians still argue whether these oversized boards were practical or theatrical backdrops for religious reenactments, but you picture priests in flowing linen directing crowds as tokens slide across life-size squares. In the late period, under Persian and Greek influence, Senet enters a new cultural phase. You sit by the Nile with a Greek mercenary, mixing pharaonic squares with Greek numeral markers. Dice reappear, six-sided clay blocks, stamped with dots. Mainstream sources note that Hellenistic settlements in Egypt introduced Greek gaming customs that blended with Senet's traditions. Historians still argue whether this melding diluted Senet's spiritual depth or enriched it with cross-cultural flair. You raise an eyebrow and joke, if only modern crossovers were this seamless. Imagine chess, Dungeons and Dragons mashups. By the Ptolemaic era, senatorial banquets feature Senet alongside Greek games like Petia. Boards become bilingual, hieroglyphs on one side, Greek letters on the other, and players switch sets mid-match to prove their versatility. A quirky rumor floats. Cleopatra herself had a board carved with her own profile on the House of Happiness. Hidden compartments containing love letters from Mark Antony, probably apocryphal, but you relish the glamour. A callback flits through, from clay pebbles in Section 2 to royal filigree in Section 8. Senet's journey mirrors yours, from humble beginnings to cosmic negotiations with deities. Under Roman rule, Senet fades in favor of new games, but pockets of enthusiasts keep it alive in temple communities. You glimpse a last workshop in 100 CE, where a priest scribe inscribes Ankh, Wedger, Seneb around the border, the mantra you first heard in Section. Mainstream evidence. Temple excavation reports show boards alongside ritual texts as late as the 3rd century CE. Yet historians still argue whether these late boards were for play, teaching, or merely symbolic artifacts preserving tradition. You brush your thumb over the wishing phrase, life, prosperity, health, and smile. Its resonance hasn't dimmed in millennia. Back in your softly lit room, the board beneath your hands carries every era's imprint. The rough lines of the Old Kingdom, the ivory inlays of the Middle, the gilded splendor of the New, and the hybrid scripts of Ptolemaic courts. Each rule tweak and decorative flourish was a response to political shifts, religious revolutions, and cultural cross-pollinations. You feel the weight of those centuries settle in your chest, a layered sediment of human ingenuity and belief. You press a final token into the House of Happiness, imagining yourself at that Ptolemaic banquet, glass of wine in hand, toasting the game's survival. A final light joke drifts free. Who knew a board game could outlive empires and still land on your nightstand? The fan hums behind you, a modern echo of craftsmen's drills and priests' chants. You breathe deeply, tasting cedar, incense, and the faint sweet tang of that honey bread from Section 9. Senet's evolution wasn't just a series of rulebooks, it was the soundtrack of Egyptian history, each kingdom composing its own movement. And you? You've listened to every note, your fingers dancing across boards shaped by time itself. With one last tap, 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 you honor Thoth's ledger and Osiris's decree. You sink back into your cushions, fingertips lingering on the board's edge as the candle gutters low. Tonight, Senet isn't basking in glittering courts or echoing through taverns. It's slipping into shadow, a fading whisper of pharaonic grandeur. You close your eyes and drift to a murky workshop in the early Roman period, around 100 CE, where artisans sigh and lay aside their chisels for demand for Senet sets as all but dried up. Picture your board stripped of hieroglyphs, corners chipped by neglect. The warm resin scent you once inhaled from fresh fires now mingles with dust and the acrid tang of animal hide. As the artisan packs away ivory scraps, a mainstream fact surfaces. By the 3rd century CE, excavations show Senet sets appearing far less frequently in tombs and homes, replaced by Greek-inspired games like Patia and Ludus Latruncultorum playing across Egypt's mosaic floors. Historians still argue whether this shift stemmed from cultural assimilation under Roman rule or from changing religious tastes as Christianity spread, and you can almost hear those debates humming in the dusty air. You brush a fingertip over a faded House of Rebirth square once alight with promise, now dulled by centuries. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Legend claims some late antique players used discarded Senet boards as cutting surfaces for leatherworking, scoring them so deeply that only the occasional stray symbol remained, as if the gods themselves scratched their nails in protest. Whether that really happened or evolved from a misinterpreted temple graffiti is uncertain, but you can't help picturing tanners sharpening knives atop sacred relics. Your senses sharpen as you imagine a crumbling villa on the Nile's western shore. The air tastes of stale wine, and cerulean tiles litter the yard, remnants of once vibrant boards. You squat to pick one up, its surface pocked and glazed over like an ancient lizard's skin. You think back to Section 6's tomb murals and Section 9's tavern laughter, wondering how swiftly a pastime can vanish. You murmur, if only Netflix had a backlog this resilient, a third light joke that ripples through your memory. By the 5th century, as monasteries dot the desert dunes, Senet boards appear in church storerooms, thought to be idolatrous relics. You picture a monk, hood drawn low, running a rosary bead across numbered squares, contemplating whether to consign the board to the pyre. A mainstream note: early Christian edicts criticized pagan diversions, leading many families to bury or break their Senet sets to avoid suspicion. Historians still argue whether this destruction was widespread or limited to urban centers, but you feel the chill of that cultural purge. Fast forward to the medieval era, roughly 1000 CE, when Cairo's spice markets bustle and camel caravans wind through the Sinai. Senet is only a memory trotted out in dusty lexicons and the occasional traveller's tale. You're sitting in a scribe's cramped study, the lantern's glow flickering on stacks of papyrus fragments. He reads aloud from a mangled scroll, Senet, that ancient contest of souls. The words crackle like embers, nearly indecipherable. You lean closer, squinting at a strange symbol you half recognize from Section 3's board descriptions. A fringe theory whispers that some Arabic poets revived Senet imagery as allegory for life's trials, but without playable boards, their verses felt like eulogies for a lost tradition. Historians still argue whether these poetic references count as evidence of any lingering gameplay. You stoke the lantern, and the smoky air conjures distant laughter. Children chasing stray pebbles, or perhaps echoes of Section 2's Nilebank matches, but those sounds dissolve as you walk through a marketplace strewn with ceramics and textiles. None bear Senet motifs. A marble tile set, abandoned at a stall, looks promising, but closer inspection reveals it's merely a board for backgammon. You shrug and joke to yourself, at least Monopoly hasn't gone extinct yet, drawing a wistful smile at the thought of cardboard and community chest. By the Renaissance, European curiosity awakens old manuscripts, but Senet remains a tantalizing footnote. You find yourself in a cluttered study in Florence, 1500 CE, where a dusty traveller presents a fragmentary sketch, 30 squares, a handful of symbols. Scholars pore over it, debating whether it's Senet or some obscure local game. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. 17th century antiquarians like Athanasius Kircher misattributed Senet's origins to distant Mesopotamia, scrambling the record. Historians still argue whether these early misreadings permanently mangled understanding, or whether they kept Senet alive in European imaginations until a clearer rediscovery. Your scene shifts to 1850 CE in a candlelit library at the British Museum. You, now a curious Egyptologist, reverently haul a buried crate of tomb artifacts onto a table. There, nestled among funerary masks, lies a battered Senet board. You brush off layers of grime and exclaim, "Well, there you are. Thought I'd lost you to history's sock drawer." A light joke slips free as you lift the board. Its colors, long faded, reveal painted lines that match those on papyri you studied. This, you realize, is the key to rekindling Senet's story. A quirky tidbit surfaces. During the initial unpacking, a museum custodian used the recovered board as a cutting board for cheese and crackers at a staff luncheon. An unfortunate mishap later immortalized in a staff newsletter cartoon. Whether apocryphal or documented, the story underscores how far the game had fallen from reverence. Yet from that moment, Senet embarked on its revival, exhibitions showcasing ancient leisure, dusty game manuals rekindled, and replicas emerging in recreations. You lean in to trace those ancient lines, feeling the board's grain like a slumbering giant stirring. You recall Section 1's present tense hook, the flick of the fan, and every ritual divine, social, strategic that once breathed life into Senet. Now, under museum lights instead of torchlight, you're part of a new chapter, one where scholars, gamers, and hobbyists puzzle over rule reconstructions and host tournaments in dimly lit museums and lively cafes. A mainstream anchor grounds you. Modern Egyptological research, beginning in the late 19th century, systematically catalogued Senet sets and correlated them with tomb inscriptions, enabling near-authentic reconstructions of rules. Historians still argue which rule variant best captures the original experience, and nightly debates rage online about blocking tactics and divine tap rituals. You smile knowing that Senet's true magic wasn't merely its squares, but its ability to inspire curiosity across millennia. The candle's last glow flickers, and you're back on your divan. The fans hum a gentle reminder of modern comforts. You set aside the board, its surface now a palimpsest of glory, neglect, and rediscovery. Whether you're a scholar chasing ancient rules or a YouTube host lulling listeners into dreamscapes, Senet's decline and near oblivion make its revival all the more miraculous. You rise, stretching limbs grown stiff from reverie. A final light joke bubbles up. Turns out, the biggest risk in Senet was historical amnesia. Good thing I remembered to hit subscribe. You sink back, the soft fan breeze carrying promise. Tomorrow you'll share this story anew, ensuring Senet's legacy never fades again. You lean forward as the fan's hum morphs into the clip-clop of 19th century carriage wheels on cobblestones. And suddenly you're standing in a dimly lit museum gallery in London, circa 1878. Glass cases line the walls, each containing dust-coated relics from the Valley of the Kings. Your heart hammers as you realize you're the first modern observer to gaze upon a real Senet board recovered from a tomb that archaeologists had just unearthed. The varnished wood gleams under gaslight, its painted symbols worn yet undeniable. The very same squares you caressed in Section 6's tomb and played on in Section 7's afterlife visions. You press your palm against the display case, breathing in the musty scent of parchment and fading wax seals. A mainstream fact anchors you here. The Egypt Exploration Fund's early expeditions, led by Flinders Petrie and Auguste Mariette, brought Senet boards to European museums in the 1870s and 1880s, igniting public fascination with games of the Pharaohs. Historians still argue whether those first boards were representative of everyday sets, or only elite funerary versions intended for tomb display. But you don't care. To you it's simply the thrill of witnessing millennia-old strategy laid bare in a Victorian gallery. An attendant in a starched frock coat paces nearby, horsehair mustache bristling as he polishes brass nameplates. You edge closer, spotting a tiny label, Senet board. A quirky tidbit flutters in your mind. Rumors circulated that some early custodians used these boards as cutting boards for staff luncheons, prosciutto and cheese laid across sacred squares until a disgruntled Egyptologist banned sandwiches in the antiquities wing. Imagine churning out a light joke. Well, at least they didn't use it for giant pizzas, right? A hush falls as Sir Wallace Budge himself emerges from a side room, spectacles perched on his nose, sweeping the gallery with a satisfied glare. He approaches the case, tapping the glass precisely 3 times, the same triple tap ritual you first performed invoking Thoth in Section 5, though here it's more an expression of awe than magic. You grin at the callback, recalling your own polite taps in countless games. Budge leans in, muttering about the secrets this board still holds, and you nod, feeling privileged to share his excitement. You drift next to a display showing early rule reconstructions by Sir Ernest Alfred Thompson Wallace Budge, and later by Francis L. Griffith. Scrolls and diagrams illustrate how they deduced gameplay from tomb inscriptions and papyrus fragments. A mainstream note, The first comprehensive rulebook, published by W.F. Albright in 1929, attempted to standardize moves into categories like simple advance and blocking capture, yet historians still argue whether these reconstructions capture the authentic experience or merely reflect modern scholars' best guesses. You close your eyes for a beat, imagining those ancient players chuckling at modern academics trying to divine their rituals. Behind you, a chalkboard lists upcoming lectures on Senet symbolism. You imagine delivering a witty aside. Tonight's lecture: why the House of Water isn't a literal swimming pool. 3 light jokes surface as you picture fellow enthusiasts wandering in top hats, quizzing each other on whether the wavy lines meant flood warnings or just a good excuse for a do-over roll. Beside the gallery case, a small recreation table displays a newly crafted Senet set, complete with ivory tokens and faience squares dyed azure. You slide one replica piece across the board and feel its weight, smooth, cool, and oddly comforting against your palm. A fringe tidbit surfaces. An enterprising 19th century artisan supposedly hid a tiny compartment under the House of Ankh square in these replicas, containing a hidden stash of tobacco, so Victorian gentlemen could puff pensively between rolls. Whether that was a clever marketing gimmick or genuine practice remains murky, but you can't resist the image of a mustachioed player pulling out a pipe mid-game. Your attention drifts to a placard detailing the 1884 Howard Carter expedition, where rolling sticks were found in the same tomb as Senet boards in Tutankhamun's burial chamber. Mainstream evidence confirms Carter's team discovered several complete sets, yet historians still argue whether these belonged to the pharaoh himself or were communal wares shared by the tomb's crew. You quip under your breath. I'd hate to imagine Carter hauling out my grandmother's board set in my tomb. You step back to admire an early painted reproduction mounted on the wall, its hues so vivid one might swear the House of Fire still smoulders. Beside it, a guest book invites visitors to record your own mood. Guests had scrawled entries like "I stole a 3-roll and felt divine," and Dr. Smythe laughs at my blocking strategy. You trace your finger over those scrawls, feeling centuries of playful rivalry stitched together. It's a callback to Section 9's tavern wages and Section 8's royal courts. Senet's spirit survived every context. Then your gaze lands on a sepia-toned photograph of a 1920s children's classroom in Cairo, where schoolboys cluster around a simple Senet board, learning counting and strategy. You recall Section 2's Nile Bank lessons and Section 9's father-son duels. A mainstream note: educators in the early 20th century adopted Senet sets as teaching aids for arithmetic and moral lessons, positioning the game as both entertainment and pedagogy. Historians still argue whether those lessons were actually effective or simply a brief fad in colonial curricula, but you smile, imagining dusty schoolrooms echoing with clacking sticks. A final display case holds a modern commercial Senet set, complete with rulebook commentary by leading Egyptologists. The box proclaims, "Play like a pharaoh," and includes tongue-in-cheek warnings about cursed tiles and divine tap penalties. You pick it up and feel its light cardboard weight, marveling that Senet now sits alongside Monopoly and chess in the world's game shops. A light joke escapes. Who knew the Pharaohs were such board game muggles? You lean back against a marble column, letting the gallery whirl around you. The echo of museum footsteps blends with your fan's hum, drawing you back to your softly lit room, yet the thrill persists. Senet's Rediscovery wasn't merely an archaeological footnote. It was a resurrection of play, strategy, and myth for a modern audience hungry for connection to antiquity. You step toward the exit, pausing to cast one last glance at that original board. It sits poised, tokens in place, as though waiting for you to pick up those stick dice and continue the game. You whisper, "I accept your challenge," imagining ancient challengers grinning back through the glass. As you cross the gallery threshold, gas lamps flicker behind you. You feel the weight of centuries in your pocket. The ivory tokens you cradled, the slip of papyrus you studied, and the modern set you now carry home. Senet's revival continues in your living room. You'll teach friends the rules, laugh over your first blocked move, and maybe, just maybe, tap the board thrice before each roll. Back in your dim room, the gallery's grandeur dissolves. The fan hums its steady lullaby, and you set the replica board on your divan. You stretch and murmur a final callback. From Pitri's cradle to my nightstand, Senet's journey is far from over. A gentle smile tugs at your lips as you prepare to play one more match, this time as both scholar and player, keeper of an ancient legacy, reborn. You lean in as the fan's hum settles into a gentle drone, fingertips brushing the flecked squares of your modern replica board. You're back in your softly lit room, but your mind drifts to dusty archives and hushed seminar rooms where scholars pore over papyri and tomb inscriptions. Tonight, Senet isn't just play or ritual. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, and you're invited into the debate. You place an ivory token on the House of Rebirth, that familiar gateway from Section 5, and feel the smooth warmth under your fingertip. You recall how in Section 7 that square symbolized a second chance, literally resurrecting a token. A mainstream fact anchors your thoughts. Modern Egyptologists have catalogued over 50 distinct papyrus fragments, mentioning Senet rules, yet none lay out a complete rulebook. Historians still argue whether those rules were standardized across Egypt or varied wildly by region and era. Leaning back, you tap the board once in homage to Thoth. 2 taps have felt luckier, 3 taps more ceremonial, but which was correct? Fringe lore suggests that some players tapped an even number of times for divine balance, while others stuck to 3s to match Osiris's triad. No surviving inscription confirms either method, and scholars still argue whether the tapping ritual was part of the original game or a later pious overlay. Your opponent across the table, quietly flipping through a PDF of recent academic articles on a tablet, glances up and murmurs. What do you make of the blocking rule? You slide your stick dice into your palm, feeling their rough edges, and reply, "Blocking, you mean where landing on an occupied square sends your rival's piece back?" They nod. You recall how in Section 5 you gleefully forced a retreat, prompting that scorpion curse joke. A mainstream note. Some papyrus rule fragments describe sacrificial moves, forcing a token backward, but none clearly state if blocks applied automatically or only under certain conditions. Historians still argue whether blocking was a universal feature or a localized house rule known only in Thebes. You toss the sticks and they skitter across the board. 2 up, 2 down, and you slide forward 2 squares onto the House of 3 Truths. You remember in Section 7 that square demanded a confession of faults or a boast of virtues. Was that real or romantic myth? A quirky tidbit whispers that a handful of boards recovered at Saqqara bear tiny painted question marks on square 29, hinting at a mid-game quiz rule where players answered riddles before proceeding. No one's found a single riddle scroll to match, and researchers still argue whether these question marks were playful graffiti or intentional markings by the original artisan. You flick your wrist and catch a glint off the gold filigree border, a callback to the royal sets in Section 8. That border might have been purely decorative, or might have contained hidden hieroglyphs that revealed bonus rules when read in sequence. Fringe theorists propose that some royal boards encoded secret victory conditions, like reaching the House of Happiness with 3 tokens simultaneously, while others insist that theory is Victorian sensationalism. Historians still argue whether any such secret rules ever existed beyond whispered court gossip. You lean forward, scenting the faint trace of cedar from the board's wood, recalling Section 3's materials deep dive. Some researchers argue that the specific choice of acacia versus sycamore affected gameplay. Acacia boards being harder facilitated faster token slides, encouraging aggressive play, whereas softer woods slowed pieces, favoring defensive tactics. It sounds poetic, but it's unlikely ancient players adjusted strategies based on wood density. Yet historians still argue whether artisans tailored boards for specific audiences, priests, soldiers, or scribes. Your opponent nudges a token into place and asks, "What about the stick dice themselves?" You grin, recalling those knobby rods from Section 5. Their outcome dictating moves, a mainstream fact. Analysis of surviving wooden sticks shows wear patterns, indicating repeated handling on one side, suggesting players favored certain toss positions. Historians still argue whether ancient gamblers deliberately sanded their sticks for consistent outcomes or if imperfections simply accrued naturally over time. You pause, gazing at the House of Waters, that dreaded trap from Sections 2 and 5. Some argue it represented not literal water, but a metaphorical testing ground, a square where only the boldest dared to linger. Fringe pundits even claim that boards found near temple precincts depict that square with red paint, symbolizing a fiery trial rather than a watery hazard. No consensus exists, and scholars still argue whether color variations signaled rule changes or artisan whimsy. A soft breeze stirs the curtains, your modern fan echoing ancient reeds, and you fold your hands. You think of the X-rule bonus moves you encountered in Section 8's Royal Match. That variation appears in fewer than 10 known sets, all from the New Kingdom elite tombs. Was it a specialized court privilege or a fleeting fad? A mainstream observation notes that those boards share stylistic similarities: ivory inlay, gold leaf, exotic woods, hinting they belong to a single workshop. Historians still argue whether that workshop served only the royal family or produced deluxe sets for high-status officials as well. Your opponent leans over and whispers, "And the afterlife metaphors, literally a map to duat, or purely symbolic?" You close your eyes and tap the House of Re-Atom Square. In Section 7, you navigated judgment halls and Anubis's scales. Was that the original intent, or poetic reading layered over mundane play? Mainstream evidence shows Senet boards buried with Book of the Dead vignettes, yet no inscription explicitly calls Senet a soul's GPS. Historians still argue whether these intimates chose boards for their play or for their spiritual symbolism. You exhale, tapping the board thrice, not for luck, but in honor of the unanswered questions themselves. The tactile click resonates, reminding you of every shrine, tavern, tomb, and court you've visited through these sections. Your opponent smiles and rolls the sticks. 3 moves, their token glides ahead to the House of Happiness. And they raise an eyebrow. Victory by divine decree, you shrug and quip. Or scholarly consensus, neither guaranteed. As you gather the pieces, you reflect on the layers of interpretation, rule fragments without context, artistic flourishes misread as gameplay guides, divine rituals possibly added centuries after the game's inception. Each new discovery spawns fresh debates, whether ambiguous terms in hieratic papyri refer to Senet or a different game, whether tiny graffiti question marks imply variants or local shorthand, whether regional rulebooks ever existed in codified form or lived solely in oral tradition. You pack away the board, its squares now a silent testament to curiosity and uncertainty. The room's light dims as the fan's hum softens. You stretch and whisper your own resolution. "I'll keep hunting those fragments. Maybe one day we'll unearth a papyrus with a complete rulebook." Your opponent nods, eyes bright, and you both share a final light joke. Until then, we keep tapping and guessing and loving the mystery. You settle back, the board tucked under your arm. The scholarly debates swirl around you like desert dust caught in dawn's first light. And you're part of that conversation, sliding tokens between certainty and speculation. Embracing that Senet's true magic lies not just in its squares but in the endless questions it poses. You lean forward as the fan's hum settles into a steady pulse, fingertips grazing the polished wood of your Senet board. Tonight, you're venturing beyond established rules and rituals into the wild hinterlands of fringe theories, those tantalizing whispers that claim Senet was more than a game or a funerary prop, but a cosmic map, initiation rite, or a secret code for elite societies. You lift a stick die and pause, sensing that with each throw you're rolling against orthodox scholarship itself. Slide your ivory token onto square 1, the House of Rebirth, and feel its familiar smooth warmth. A mainstream fact underpins this journey. Senet boards and accompanying texts often appeared alongside astronomical charts in late New Kingdom tombs, hinting at a possible link between gameplay and celestial observation. Historians still argue whether those charts guided moves or simply shared tomb space by coincidence. You close your eyes and imagine ancient players peering at Orion's belt before picking up their sticks. One fringe theory floats to the forefront. Senet as a celestial journey map, each square corresponding to a star or constellation. Proponents point to tomb paintings where Senet grids overlay star maps in the ceiling's vault. You recall Section 7's Afterlife Passage, but this theory goes further, claiming that skilled play could align your soul with the stars. It's like stargazing by proxy, a cosmic cheat code. You grin at the idea. If only I had a stargazing app that gave me cheat moves for my next date. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. Imagine arguing over whether Square 26 is Orion or Betelgeuse, or questioning why no one bothered to include the Milky Way's fuzzy band. Next, you consider the initiation rite theory, spoken of in hushed tones by esoteric societies. According to scattered late-period papyri, novices undertook a Senet match blindfolded, guided only by a priest's whispered directions, a test of faith, memory, and trust. A quirky tidbit emerges. One Coptic-era parchment describes a stone-cold, silent game, where failure meant a public snack, humiliation. Losers had honey poured over their heads at dawn. Whether that actually happened or was a drunken monk's exaggeration is debatable, but it's charming to picture a hapless initiate dripping honey in monastic cells. Historians still argue whether any organized secret societies actually practiced these rites, or if the papyri were playful satire. You roll your sticks across the board, 2 up, 1 down, and slide into square 6, the House of Reatum. Let yourself imagine the vaulted ceiling above you, painted with depictions of those old rituals. The board vibrates under your fingertip like a tuning fork, calling you deeper into mystery. A mainstream note anchors you. A handful of tomb inscriptions reference secret games of the temple. Language vague enough to include Senet, but precise rituals remain elusive. Scholars still argue whether secret games were purely spiritual metaphors or literal hidden matches for initiates. You lean back and joke. Imagine trying to host that session without a YouTube tutorial. Another tantalizing hypothesis is the coded communication theory. Senet boards served as low-tech messaging devices. According to letters found in Ramside archives, courtiers slid tokens into carved channels beneath boards, carrying covert instructions or spy reports to distant nobles. It's like the original message in a bottle, disguised as idle play. A quirky tidbit: one board recovered near Thebes still bears faint ink traces in a hidden groove. Some say it reads, "Beware the vizier's dog." Whether that ink was from a real spy ring or a tomb robber's graffiti remains unsolved. Historians still argue whether these grooves were intentional secret compartments or byproducts of board construction. You slide another token forward, landing on square 14, the dreaded House of Waters. In cosmic map lore, that square represents the Milky Way's river. Crossing it was a test of astronomical knowledge. You chuckle. So drowning in waters was actually navigating the galaxy. Take that, modern planetarium. 3 light jokes later, you shake your head at how seriously some hobbyists debate the exact star-square assignments. Next in your Fringe tour is the numerological theory. Every square's hieroglyph has numerical value, and moves formed sacred sequences echoing the mart of cosmic order. Some enthusiasts claim that if you record your rolls and sum them, you'll unlock hidden philosophical truths. A quirky anecdote: at a Fringe convention in Cairo last century, attendees tried to decode a Senet secret by summing 3-move throws until someone yelled "enough math" and poured date wine instead. Whether that convention existed or was a rumor is debated, but it's a delightful image. Scholars passing around wine goblets, lamenting unsolvable sequences. Historians still argue whether ancient players factored numerology into their matches or simply played for fun. Your sticks clatter again, 3 up, 1 down, and you nudge your token onto square 26, the House of Thoth. Here, avatars say players were judged for scholarly merit. Landing on this square meant reciting a sacred phrase or risk forfeiting a piece. Some boards even bear tiny painted glyphs of a recitation mantra beside square 26. A mainstream fact grounds you: a papyrus fragment from the 13th century BCE mentions a recital of wisdom linked to gaming, though it doesn't explicitly name Senet. Scholars still argue whether that fragment refers to public recitations or to gameplay rituals. You whisper under your breath, "Wish I could recite the ancient original, my bedtime speeches could use an upgrade." Lean back and breathe in the mingled scents of cedar and lavender. Seasonal incense wafts from your candle. You consider the psychotherapeutic theory. Fringe psychologists propose that Senet served as early cognitive therapy, channeling daydreams about fate, decision-making, and coping with loss. Landing on certain squares symbolized control over life's chaos, helping players process grief and uncertainty. A quirky tidbit: a 19th century asylum journal mentions patients at a Cairo clinic playing Senet to soothe nervous complaints, an early form of game therapy. Whether those sessions were formally therapeutic or casual pastimes is uncertain, but you imagine a Victorian doctor prescribing Senet for melancholia. Historians still argue whether any medical use of Senet was sanctioned or merely anecdotal. Your next toss, 0 moves, leaves you stalled on square 20, the House of Three Truths. You smile at the irony. Fringe theories may be half-truths themselves. A mainstream observation rings clear. Despite all these theories, no single ancient source confirms any of them definitively, making Senet a perennial playground for speculation. Historians still argue whether to dismiss Fringe ideas as fanciful, or to investigate them as possible reflections of lost practices. You cup your sticks for one final roll, heart fluttering, feeling each rod's grain against your palm. They spill across the board, 4 moves, and you slide into the House of Happiness. Triumph, you think, is not just winning a game, but celebrating the joyous mystery that surrounds it. 3 light jokes spring to mind about cosmic cheat codes, coded couriers, and unwinnable therapy sessions, but you contain them in a contented grin. As you gather the pieces into their pouch, the fans hum and candles glow merge into a soft lullaby. You've traversed star maps and secret societies, diplomatic subterfuge and psychological healing, all whispered in the silent click of ivory on wood. And though every theory dances on the edge of evidence and imagination, it reminds you that Senet's greatest magic lies in its capacity to captivate the human mind across millennia. You lean back on your divan, feeling the weight of possibility warm your chest. Whether cosmic map or therapeutic tool, initiation rite or spy gadget, Senet remains entwined with our endless craving for meaning. And you carry those theories with you like secret talismans, ready to share them in hushed tones around your next board game night. Just don't blindfold your friends with honey. You lean back as the fan's steady whisper merges with distant echoes of temple bells and marketplace chatter, realizing Senet's story has outlived pharaohs, priests, and pyramids. Tonight, you're tracing its legacy through millennia, feeling its spirit ripple through modern lives like footprints in timeless sand. With each piece you slide toward the House of Happiness. You sense Senet's enduring pulse in art, literature, and the playful flicker of screens and tabletops worldwide. Imagine a contemporary artist in Cairo painting a mural where faience tiles shimmer beside neon hieroglyphs, capturing Senet's echo in urban streets. In museums, interactive displays let visitors flick virtual sticks, their digital tokens casting soft glows on polished glass. A mainstream fact hums beneath your reverie. Since the late 20th century, designers and historians have collaborated to produce functional Senet replicas in cafes, universities, and gaming conventions, reviving the game as an enduring pastime. Yet historians still argue whether these modern sets honor the ancient experience or reinterpret it through contemporary lenses. You lift an ivory replica token warm in your hand, and recall how its ancestors once lay in royal tombs, slipped beside mummies like keys to eternity. Now that same form rides digital waves in board game apps, its texture simulated by code. Fringe communities online debate house rules and decorate custom boards in every color imaginable, from ultraviolet grids that glow under blacklight to minimalist Scandinavian wood designs. You chuckle at the thought. Ancient artisans might have marveled at acrylic paints and laser-cut precision. In classrooms, teachers use Senet to introduce students to probability and history. You recall Section 9's father-son duels and Section 13's Victorian schoolrooms. Now children swipe tablets to roll digital sticks or hurl 3D printed tokens. A charming tidbit, some educators have students compose their own hieroglyphic decals for boards, blending art, history, and math in a single lesson. Historians still argue whether gamified history enhances learning or merely entertains, but you know those bright-eyed lessons spark curiosity far beyond dusty tomes. Then there are the theatre productions where actors pantomime Senet, matches in minimalist plays exploring fate and free will. Audiences watch as tokens become symbols of choice, destiny, and chance. Themes that resonate as deeply now as in the silent halls of Karnak. Fringe art troupes stage Senet rituals under moonlight, inviting strangers to play blindfolded with whispered guidance. A playful homage to rumored initiation rites. You smile, imagining that honey-pouring monastic gag played out in a dramatic performance. Collectors prize rare antique boards at auctions, bidding quietly beneath chandelier light. One set sold for a fortune, its provenance tracing back to a rediscovered New Kingdom tomb. Meanwhile, hobbyists trade handmade artisan boards on online marketplaces, each one a unique interpretation of square icons and motifs. A mainstream note surfaces. Auction records confirm that genuine ancient Senet boards have fetched six-figure sums, underscoring their enduring allure. Yet historians still argue whether commodifying sacred artifacts honors their legacy or reduces them to status symbols. You press your token onto the House of Three Truths, and pause, thinking of Section 7's confessions and Section 15's conspiracy theories. Today's truth is simple. Senet embodies humanity's fascination with fate and strategy, community and solitude, play and ritual. Its squares are as much metaphors as wood and stone, inviting you to ponder life's pathways each time you roll. In living rooms and cafes from Ho Chi Minh City to Helsinki, Friends gather around modern Senet sets, laughing at upsets, teasing rivals, and savouring shared moments. You recall the tavern wagers in Section 9 and the royal courts in Section 8, now distilled into casual evenings where hieroglyphs meet craft beer. Fringe podcasts dissect gameplay tactics. YouTube channels offer ASMR unboxings of deluxe sets, and TikTok dances celebrate each victory throw in slow motion. As you slide your final token into the House of Happiness, you feel gratitude for this game's journey, from sun-baked Nile banks to digital streams, from temple sanctuaries to coffee shop tables. Senet's legacy isn't confined to dusty archives, but lives in every thoughtful move, every burst of laughter, every whispered strategy. Its reverie continues in the stories we share, the boards we shape, and the dreams we weave under soft lamplight and ceiling fans. One day, the candle's glow softens, your room drawing in a gentle hush. Each fan-blown breeze carries you farther from the clatter of tokens, and into a place where time drifts like desert sands. You've travelled courts and tombs, taverns and temples, and now you rest at journey's end. Let your breath fall into a quiet rhythm, each exhale releasing the day's burdens, each inhale welcoming a calm warmth. Feel the board dissolve beneath your fingertips, its painted squares fading into memory. In their place rises a serene expanse, golden dunes under a moon-pale sky, the hush of distant waves lapping against an unseen shore. You are weightless, drifting across that silent desert where the heavens stretch in jeweled curves above you. Know that Senet's echoes remain tucked in your heart, a reminder that play can be ritual, that chance can teach wisdom, and that every choice moves us closer to understanding ourselves. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine tokens settling into soft sand, their final positions a gentle promise of rest. The air around you hums softly, cradling you in comfort. Tomorrow awaits with its bustle and tasks, but tonight you are suspended beyond time's demands. In this tender moment, let your mind wander through ancient halls and starlit courts, then gently close those chapters with a sigh. Now, let silence fill the space between thoughts. If a distant whisper of temple bells drifts through your dreams, let it guide you toward peace. You are safe, you are whole, and you've played your part in an endless story written across centuries. Fade now into soft darkness. Sweet dreams.